Hello, History Leaks here. The relationship between human beings and big predators like lions, tigers, and bears has changed a lot over the course of history. Today, most animals are afraid of our lights, our loud machinery, and our weapons. Despite all of this, attacks do still happen, especially in rural areas where technology and security isn't the norm. In rare cases, animal attacks make international news or they go viral across the internet. But there was one incident which made international headlines before the internet even existed. In 1898, in the Tsavo region of Kenya, two male lions began systematically hunting and eating human prey. Most of the deaths occurred during the construction of a British railroad line along the Tsavo River. The lions were so stealthy and so coordinated in their attacks. It is said that they killed over 100 people, and many of the construction workers who they were hunting believed they were demonic entities. Before I continue with the story, I'll give you some context on the region. Most of Kenya's history is undocumented until around the 8th century AD, when Muslim traders from Arabia established the first trading posts along Kenya's coast. This became known as the Swahili coast and was influenced by both African and Arab cultures. The Portuguese then took over these trade routes in the 16th century, followed by a return to Arab control in 1720. There were also the Maasai, a nomadic people who came from the north and settled in Kenya around 1750. They controlled much of the interior of the country, while the coastal region was under the Omani Empire. In the 1850s, Kenya became a hotspot for European expansionism, especially for the British, as Kenya was a key stopover on their trade route to India. The British planned to construct a new railway line to replace the traditional Arabic and Swahili trade caravans which operated in the region for generations. This would also give them much greater control over Kenya's interior. But building the railway was a costly challenge. Draft animals couldn't handle the intense heat, making the transport of construction supplies slow and time-consuming. Water was also scarce, as the Tsavo River was one of their only sources. And not to mention, disease from the tsetse flies was rampant and widespread. To build the railway, the British brought in foreign workers from India. By 1899, Kenya had around 18,000 Indian workers. The Indian rupee even became Kenya's primary currency. In the traditional language of the 𝐾𝐨 people of Kenya, Tsavo means place of slaughter, a reference to the historic Maasai raids and strange disappearances that took place along the Tsavo River. Arabic and Swahili caravan leaders also shared stories of travelers who vanished overnight, leaving no traces behind. During the initial work for the railroad line, the first disappearances began to be reported by British engineers. Ronald Preston, the head rail engineer in 1897, noted that a loincloth was found at the edge of the river, but the man it belonged to was nowhere to be found. His remains were discovered later. His entire body had been defleshed, except for his feet and his head, and lion paw prints were discovered all around the remains. It appeared the mysterious disappearances were due to a man-eating lion. Preston was disturbed, and he and his crew immediately went back to camp and began to build bomas, which are thorny natural stockades and fortifications around their tent. The next morning, they went out with a hunting party to find the lion, but it was nowhere to be found. The incidents kept on occurring during the construction of the railroad tracks until another man was put in charge, John Henry Patterson. He had just finished his military service in India and was sent to manage this railroad project in Kenya. He arrived in the Tsavo camp in March 1898. Patterson's account is the most detailed description we have of the Tsavo Lion incident. It's important to note that the Tsavo camp was huge. It had around 3,000 workers staying in it, and many of them were from different ethnic and religious groups. Patterson tells us that there were disputes between some of the Muslim and Hindu workers, as well as between the African and Indian groups. It was within this heated and stressful environment in the camp that the attacks became more frequent. The camp was also so massive that if something happened on one side of the camp, people on the other side wouldn't necessarily notice. A few nights later, an Indian lieutenant named 𝐥𝐢𝐤𝐤 was brutally killed. His tent mates claim that at around midnight, a lion's head came through their open tent and seized 𝐷𝐤𝐤 by the neck, dragging him out of the tent. There was nothing they could do, but at dawn, Patterson went out with a search party to look for 𝐷𝐤𝐤. They followed the drag marks and the blood trail, and eventually they found his body. He had been torn apart. It looked like his skin had been licked off and the blood sucked dry from his body. Only his head remained intact, although there were puncture wounds from the lion's teeth. Patterson noted that there was a look of terror on 𝐷𝐤𝐤's face. This instilled terror over the Tsavo camp. The workers began building more bomas and barricades around their tents. A lot of the livestock which had died from disease was set up as bait while the men lied in wait for the lions to return. But the lions never reappeared. A few days later, 2 more men were mauled, and Patterson had been waiting with his rifle in a completely different area. Patterson was determined. He set up traps, he laced animal remains with poison, and stayed up most nights, hoping to shoot what he thought was a single lion. But it soon became apparent to him that it wasn't just a single lion killing the workers, but 2 working in unison. And they weren't interested in dead animals. The lions targeted the sleeping workers. They stealthily jumped over the bomas and ambushed their prey. One lion would go in and make the kill and flee away out of the camp so the other lion could eat. In late April, the attacks finally stopped. Patterson believed he frightened the lions away, and that was a time of peace, and the workers let their guard down a little bit. The tents spread out, and the workers even began sleeping outside to catch the cool night breeze. But a few months later in November, the attacks started again. And this time, the lions seemed like they had no fear. They would ambush sleeping men and pull them straight through the thorny bomas. They began eating them directly outside of the camp in full view of everyone, and didn't seem fazed when the workers would shoot at them. Every night, Patterson tried to ambush the lions, but he failed. And it wouldn't be until December 9th that he finally shot one of the lions. First, he shot it in the thigh, and then the neck. He waited until dawn to approach the lion, and it was covered in scratches from the thorny bomas. But it was indeed dead. This lion measured 9 feet and 8 inches from nose to the tip of its tail, and it took 8 men to carry the carcass back to the camp. The next night, the second lion attacked the camp, but didn't manage to kill anyone. Patterson tied a goat to a railroad beam, and just before dawn, the lion seized the goat, pulling it into the bush. Patterson was able to shoot it twice in the shoulder, but it escaped. 10 days would pass without any sign of the lion. But then it returned to the camp. It attacked, but didn't manage to kill anyone. On December 28th, Patterson waited for the lion. He managed to shoot it in the chest, and it fled into the bush. Patterson pursued it with his porter. He managed to shoot it again, but lost it in the darkness. At dawn, he tracked the trail of blood to the injured lion. It suddenly sprung up and lunged at Patterson, but he was able to climb a tree. As the lion circled the tree, he managed to shoot it again. This time in the leg, the chest, and finally the head. The lion fell dead with 6 bullets in its body. Patterson claimed it died gnawing on a tree branch, still trying to reach him. The whole camp celebrated, praising Patterson as a hero, and he immediately had the lions skinned and turned into rugs to decorate his tent. But he left the head and skulls of the lions intact. Work on the railroad continued without further attacks, and the camp moved up along the Tsavo River. Patterson published his account of the 9-month ordeal in 1907. He referred to it as a reign of terror and claimed that around 28 Indian laborers were killed by these lions, as well as an unknown number of African workers. The reason the deaths of the native Africans wasn't recorded, according to Patterson, is because they were often paid with things other than money, and their names weren't on the official books of the camp. So they had no way of knowing who they were. Patterson's account of the Tsavo incident became so internationally popular that he began to tour the world and give talks about his experience. After giving a talk at the Chicago Field Museum in 1924, he mentioned to the curators that he still had the lion pelts, and eventually he sold them to the museum for $5,000. The museum took the lion pelts and carefully reconstructed them back into the shape of the lions, and you can actually see them on display in the Chicago Field Museum today. Many people are surprised when they see these lions that they don't have manes, but a lot of the male lions in this region of Kenya have very little mane, especially compared to South African lions, which are known for much bushier, thicker manes. Scientists were also very intrigued as to what caused these lions to start hunting humans, and after analyzing collagen and keratin from the lion's teeth, they found that for the first lion, human meat made up around 30% of his diet, while for the second lion it was only 13%. This was a lot lower than they expected, but it could be because they didn't necessarily eat every single person that they killed. The bone and teeth analysis also showed that the first lion suffered from a broken tooth as well as a lot of infection, and they believe he wouldn't have been able to hunt his natural prey and deliver a killing bite. It would have been very painful for him, and that's probably why he switched to human prey. And the reason that there were two male lions is because oftentimes male lions leave their pride. They only stay with a pride for around 2 years before moving on to another pride to find new mates and to spread their genes. Sometimes male lions go in a pair, which is called a coalition. And so they believe that these two lions were a coalition, and they might have got used to eating humans because at the time in Kenya, due to the famine and disease outbreak, there would have been dead bodies strewn all across the countryside. And so it's possible that the lions became accustomed to eating human meat from the corpses that they found. And this maybe led them to actually hunting live humans. While humans are not usually the targets of wild carnivores, there are certain situations that push them to become man-eaters. These situations are times of desperation, often caused by the humans themselves, but that doesn't stop it from being terrifying and gruesome for both the humans and animals involved. Thank you for watching. If you liked that video, don't forget to subscribe for more historical content, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.